Hey guys, good day. I want to talk today about something that's, I would say, the absolute most important part about the Christian faith. Not religion, not man-made religion, but the Christian faith. And it's what Jesus told us the night that before he was arrested and crucified. He sat his disciples down and he was telling them about his Father's house. He said, in my Father's house are many rooms, and obviously that's in heaven. That's not on this planet. And if it were not so, I would have told you. And he says, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may also be. So, if every pastor started every sermon and recited John 14:1 through 3, and reminded the church that this is not our home, we are sojourners, we're passing through, and that our home is in heaven, I think people would have a different outlook on life on this planet. When you remind so-called Christians that there will be a day, we don't know when, no one knows the day or the hour, that Jesus is going to return and take his faithful followers off this planet, they become scared. They act like Lot's wife, and they look back and they see Sodom, and they yearn for this world. It just it's not the way that I would say people should be thinking about their future. They should consider themselves, strangers. We're not citizens of this world. We're just passing through. So with that, let's look at what Jesus offers us. This this removal from the planet. Basically, Scripture teaches that one day He's going to come and get us, but when that occurs, um, He Himself tells us in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21 that there's going to be some events on the planet that are going to be extremely catastrophic, and He's going to remove us as these events begin to occur, or as they are occurring. And so the promise is He will come and remove us when these catastrophic events begin, and that He's got a mansion for us that's personally designed and configured for us in heaven. And we get a brand new body that will never die, and we will get to spend eternity with our friends and loved ones forever. So what's keeping people from seeing this offer and not taking Him up? The deal is this: there is no cost. It's free. I mean, we all know that our theology teaches that He paid the price on the cross, and that all we need to do is respond to His call and put our faith in Him. We need to put faith in Him the same way that a skydiver puts faith in a parachute. I mean, if you're on a plane and the captain comes on and says, we're going to run out of fuel in 10 minutes, but the good news is we have parachutes for everybody. You have to have faith that when you put the parachute on and jump, that the parachute's going to save you. If you just sit in your seat in the plane and you know about that parachute, you know that parachute will save you, but you don't get up and put it on, you're going to go and you're going to crash, the plane's going to crash, and you're going to die. That's the same way with the Christian faith. You got to put your faith in Jesus and actually take the step and jump. So with that, let's go ahead and talk about the rapture and what's been described here for us in this word in the Bible that talks about this. Now, let me just move forward here. So Jesus talks about there will be a day where the heavens will be shaking and the world will have some object coming to it. Jesus says people will be fainting with fear and foreboding for what is coming upon the world. Some object will be coming upon the world. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud. We see that in Luke 21. But Jesus says, but stay awake at all times and watch, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things, so that you can stand before the Son of Man. In Matthew 24, he has a similar event he talks about, and he says prior to seeing him in the sky, that there's going to be this sign that's going to appear in heaven and in the expanse of the sky, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn. All the lukewarm and the non-believers are going to look up and see him somehow. I don't know how it's going to occur. The trumpet will blow, and then he'll send out his angels to gather his elect. That's the words of Jesus. And then we know from the Apostle Paul, who teaches about what that event might be like. Now, a lot of folks argue about this next topic, and that's the timing of this removal from the planet. People call it the rapture. I'm not going to discuss that here. That's very controversial, but here Paul describes what's going to occur. Paul mentions that there will be a trumpet of God, and all the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and left behind, is what it says, will be caught up. That word harpazo, that's the word rapture in the Latin Vulgate. It means violently kidnapped. It's like being grabbed by the shoulder or the shirt collar, being yanked up into the air to meet Jesus up in the air. And we're told to encourage one another with these words. And then right after this occurs, there's a scene in the book of Revelation, chapter 7, where it says, this is the Apostle John who wrote the book of Revelation under the influence of Jesus. He says, after John looked, he was seeing a vision. Behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all the tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. So here John is seeing in a vision a great multitude of people, obviously believers in Jesus, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. And that harkens back to what it says in Luke 21. Jesus says, but stay awake, praying that you have the strength to escape all these things, not stay here and go through it, but to escape and stand before the Son of Man. So we see that obviously the Apostle John, who wrote the book of Revelation, it's the last book in the Bible, was describing the result of what Jesus spoke of in Luke 21. So where do we see this same sort of description in the Old Testament? A lot of people think the rapture is just a New Testament teaching, but the rapture and the escape to Mount Zion, or the heavenly Mount Zion, is all over the Old Testament. But first, let's talk about here Zephaniah chapter 2. Zephaniah was a prophet in the Old Testament, and he actually describes this, to some degree, this event, and he refers to a nation, a shameless nation. So Jesus has compassion, the Lord has compassion on this nation. He calls them shameless, but he's even telling them in their shame to gather together before the decree takes effect. Before comes the burning anger of the Lord. So this gathering and removal and being kept safe is before the decree. Now, what's the decree? We see in Malachi chapter 4. Now, Malachi is the last book of the Old Testament. He says, behold, I will send Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction. So we know that this decree is utter destruction. It's punishment for the wicked. But we're told here that at least there's a shameless nation out there that's being gathered together. And that people, that the folks that are being gathered together, says, seek the Lord, all you humble of land. That would be the humble of the land, who do his just commands, and seek righteousness and seek humility perhaps that you may be hidden on the day of the anger of the Lord. And we see that the anger of the Lord is obviously when this decree of utter destruction. Then we can read in Psalm 90. It says, out of Zion. Now we know the Lord is that's where his throne is. Perfection of beauty. God shines forth. Our God comes. Now this is the Old Testament. It's not going to say Jesus comes. It's going to say our God comes. He does not keep silent. Before him, as he comes, there is a devouring fire. Around him, a mighty tempest. He calls to the heavens above and to the earth below, that he may judge his people. He says, gather to me my faithful ones, those who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. Now this is the Old Testament, and back then the sacrifice was a temporary yearly sacrifice where they would kill an animal. But I would say that this is referring to the sacrifice that the Apostle Paul talks about in Romans 12, where he says, present your body as a living sacrifice. And the way that you do that is you acknowledge God, you follow his commands, and you call upon his name. Now, continuing on, more references to the rapture in the Old Testament. Here in Isaiah 57, it talks about verse 1. It says, the righteous man perishes, and no one takes it to heart. and devout men are taken away, gathered and removed. That's what the word means, and that's an alternate translation from Hebrew. While no one understands. So when these people are taken, these righteous people who know who God is, call upon his name, no one's going to understand where they went. The people left behind. For the righteous man is taken away from evil, and he enters peace. They, devout men, rest in their beds, each one who walked upright in his own way. But to those left behind, the prophet says, but you, come here, you sons of sorcerers, offspring of an adulterer and a prostitute. That's the folks left behind that do not honor our God. Now, another version of this is in Micah chapter 7, and we actually see a little bit of timing that's given here. In Micah chapter 7, verses 1 and 2, it says, "How this is somebody left behind. How miserable I am. I feel like the fruit picker after the harvest, who can find nothing to eat, not a cluster of grapes or a single early fig." Now the fig tree has two crops, an early spring fig and then a late fall crop that's in the fall, September, October time frame. So not a single early fig can be found to satisfy my hunger. The godly people have all disappeared. Not one honest person is left on the planet. Folks left behind, they are all murderers, setting traps even for their own brothers. Psalm 12:1 has the same thing. It says, "Save, O Lord, for the godly one is gone, for the faithful have vanished from among the children of men." Everyone, the people left, everyone utters lies to his neighbor, with flattering lips and with a double heart they speak. Psalm 18 describes the same thing. If you read Psalm 18, it sounds a lot like Psalm 50, about this fire and tempest that are coming to the earth. If you read the early verses, it discusses all that. Then it says, "He sent from on high, he took me," same lingo that Jesus uses from John 14:3. "He drew me up out of many waters." It's funny how he mentions waters, because Jesus talks about how the waters and the waves will be really high, because many folks think that the earth is going to be encountering serious climatic issues that are going to be causing the water to overflow the beaches. What type of day? We learn from Ezekiel 34. It says that the Lord seeks out his sheep, and he says he will rescue them from all the places where they have been scattered on a day of thick clouds. Psalm 60 talks about the same thing, and even mentions that sign, "I've set up a banner." But it starts off by saying, "Oh God, you have rejected us, broken our defenses. You have been angry with us. Oh, restore us. You have made our land a quake. You have torn it open. Repair its breaches, for it totters." Isaiah 24 talks about the earth reeling back and forth like a drunken man. It says, "You have made our people to see hard things." And it says, "You have set up a banner." That's that sign. "For those who fear you, that they may flee to it from the bow." So someone's going to flee to a sign in the sky from the bow, and the bow represents some sort of weapon or something. "That your beloved ones may be delivered. Give salvation by your right hand and answer us." Here's an interesting mention of a type of departure or rapture. In Isaiah 11, it says, it refers to a second time. "In that day the Lord will extend his hand yet a second time," as if there is a second departure. And I believe that there's actually multiple departures, to recover the remnant that remains in of this people from all different parts of the world. Even here it says the coastlands of the sea. Some folks think that the U.S. and other lands that are outside of the Middle East are referred to as the coastlands. It says he, in Isaiah 11, will raise a signal. There's that raising a signal again. That's a sign of the Son of Man for the nations. "And he will assemble the banished from the house of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." It sounds very similar to what Jesus says in Matthew 24. Isaiah 13, it's all over Isaiah, this signal being raised. "On a bare hill, raise a signal, cry aloud to them, wave the hand to them, and let them enter into the gates of the nobles." Isaiah 18, so we've seen what? Isaiah 11, Isaiah 13, Isaiah 18, all talking about this signal being raised. "All you inhabitants of the world, you who dwell on the earth," that's everybody. "When the signal is raised, sign of the Son of Man, on the mountains, look, when the trumpet is blown. Where do we hear the trumpet blow? That's Matthew 24. It's First Thessalonians 4. And it's saying that for the Lord himself has said, I will quietly look from my dwelling place. That's him. He's going to be up in heaven in those clouds looking down in the heat of the harvest. At that time, a tribute, a gift of homage will be brought to the Lord of hosts from a people tall and smooth. That tall and smooth in the Hebrew really means lifted up and without blemish. From a people feared far and wide. And they'll be brought to Mount Zion, the place in heaven. And where do we see this? People brought to Mount Zion, a place in heaven. We saw that right up in here. It's the same thing. After this I looked up, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number from every nation, standing before the throne. That throne is in Mount Zion. If you read Revelation chapter 14, it's the same thing. Here's the trumpet being blown. People gathered up. Here's a voice. Here's that shout that we just read in Isaiah 18. It's all the same stuff from the Old Testament, describing what was talked about in the New Testament, right here. So, here, when the trumpet is blown, I think the shout is up here. Anyway, let's keep going. Now, it says, at that time, a tribute, a gift of homage will be brought to the Lord of hosts. Well, in 2 Corinthians, in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul speaks about desiring to present the faithful believers to one husband. That would be Jesus, to present him as a pure virgin to Christ. Paul's talking about that gift of homage that's here in Isaiah 18. In Revelation 14, we see another group of believers that have made themselves pure as virgins, and they are a special offering, gift, or tribute to God and the Lamb. If you read Revelation 14, it talks about 144,000 standing on Mount Zion with the Lamb, who happens to be Jesus. In Isaiah 49, this is the fourth reference to this sign. It says, thus says the Lord God, behold, I will lift up my hand to the nations. That means punishment's coming. And raise my signal to the peoples. And they will bring your sons and your daughters to be carried on their shoulders into heaven. Later on it says, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken, and the prey of the tyrant shall be rescued. For I will contend with those who contend with me, and I will save your children. Here it is again, Isaiah 62. This is the sixth time it's mentioned in Isaiah, this signal, talking about this. And here it says, say to the daughter of Zion, those who are left in Israel, behold, your salvation comes. That word salvation in Hebrew is Yeshua. And Yeshua is the Hebrew version of Jesus. It's like saying, behold, your Jesus comes, and his reward is with him. And his recompense, that's payback, is before him. So let me talk real quickly about Mount Zion. We talked earlier about escaping to Mount Zion. Luke 21, Jesus says, pray that you have the strength to escape all these things and stand before the Son of Man. So we see here that there's a group of folks standing on Mount Zion with the Lamb. They're singing a new song. Jeremiah 50:28. It says, a voice. They flee and escape to the land from the land of Babylon and declare in Zion. It's the same description of the event written in the Old Testament. Joel 2. And it shall come to pass that anyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be those who escape. Obadiah chapter 1 verse 7. But in Mount Zion there will be those who escape. It's the same thing. Zechariah 2. Up, escape, you who dwell with the daughter of Babylon. That's probably the USA. You know, when Jesus returns, there's going to be a cry that's going to go out to escape. So, with that, I just wanted to run through, spend a little bit of time describing what this harpazo rapture is. And when people talk about the rapture and they roll their eyes and they laugh about it and they say, you really think you Christians are going to leave all this? Well, I guess it really depends on the timing. And we looked at the timing here, and the timing specifically says that before these climactic events begin, or right as they begin, he's going to return and gather his faithful believers. Anyway, guys, have a good day. God bless you.